good evening. Tonight, you'll hear 40 accounts from 40 ordinary people. Truckers on empty highways, farmers checking barns, rail workers walking silent yards, night crews at mills and grain elevators, each encountering the Dogman. Work enough night shifts, eventually something notices.
Been sitting here on my metal folding chair, sipping on this black coffee from my old thermos, trying to keep my eyes open in the dead of night. This place could drive a lesser man crazy with the quiet, save for the sound of the wind weaving through the trees and the occasional hoot of an owl. The chill of late fall cuts through my jacket and creeps into my bones, making the thermos a welcome companion, even if the coffee tastes like burnt gravel after a while. The abandoned entrance of this old coal mine is where I spend my nights. It's out in the middle of nowhere, just the rusting remnants of another time and me. Folks around here spin tales about the glory days, but now all that's left is shadows and coal dust that settles into everything. Some nights, when that generator starts up, it rattles the night like a dying cat. But I make do, accustomed to the sound and the rhythm of this place. It's around 2 a.m. when I hear it, a rustling coming from the brush nearby. Now, I've heard that before. Usually just a wild turkey out for a stroll. I take another swig from the thermos, letting the warmth seep back through me, and try to ignore the sound. But the rustling doesn't fade away like it should. Nah, it keeps going, and it starts to get louder, and I can't help but figure something ain't right. The wind picks up, and the brush shakes harder than any turkey I'd ever come across. It's enough to make a man sit up a bit straighter, eyes narrowing at the shadows beyond the reach of my small camp lantern. I tell myself it's just a critter, maybe a deer spooked by the wind, but there's an unease that grips my insides, as if the November frost had taken hold. Moonlight slips through the sparse branches, casting odd shapes that dance around me. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I catch a glimpse. A figure that don't look right. It resembles a person, but there's something off, moving among the trees with an agility that seems out of place. Just enough moonlight to suggest more than my mind can comfortably handle. My breath catches, and the coffee sloshes in the thermos as my hands start to shake. That thing steps into a patch of dim light, and there's no denying it now. Eyes, 2 fixed points in the dark, stare back, set into a form that defies what should belong in this world. Stretched and disquieting, and it stayed with me. For a moment, I'm frozen, but a man can't stay like that forever. I fumble for my flashlight, nearly knocking it off the chair's armrest. My thumb stumbles over the switch, desperate to cut through the dark and make whatever that is vanish. The beam slices through the shadows, a narrow shaft of light searching for the creature. But the darkness refuses to yield easily. My light cuts through nothing but empty night, as if it swallowed up the very thing I sought to find. My heart hammers loud enough to drown out even that relentless generator, and an unsettling sense of its presence grows stronger. I can almost feel it brushing against me, though my eyes see no confirmation. The next breath I take is drawn careful and shallow, because there's something in the air now, a new sound threading itself through the night. It's breathing, but not like anything I've ever heard. A strange rhythm no wind or animal could mimic. It wraps around the damp earth and coal dust, filling the hollow of this old mine and drowning out every other noise. And that's where I end up, sitting there with a flashlight making the shadows press in harder, a thermos of coffee gone cold in the November air, and the lingering presence of something breathing that has no place being there.
I had been out walking with my grandson, and we were on this small road that wound through the woods. My grandson suddenly stopped and pointed, saying, "Look, Papa," as he picked up a t-shirt. This shirt wasn't torn like you'd expect from a person. It had been absolutely shredded, clawed apart. It put me on high alert. I knew these creatures were out there. I've been dealing with them for years. But seeing something like that made me wonder what was really going on. Where were the rangers? Why weren't there warnings if they knew about this? We hiked through a wooded area known for the most sightings over the past 30 years. We came across a large, smashed-down tent that looked fairly new. It seemed like a body was inside. I told my grandkids to stay back. I didn't want them to see something gruesome if it was what I thought. As it turned out, it wasn't a dead man. The tent's contents were water-soaked, and inside was brand new hunting gear, worth about $700. What really caught my eye was a discharged 12-gauge shotgun. The shell casing lay off to the right. I couldn't help but wonder why someone would be shooting from inside that tent and what they were aiming at. I've been familiar with that area for a long time, and something wasn't right. The person had been collecting bones. A bunch of them was found inside the tent. I couldn't say why, but considering the shirt and the tent, it seemed like these creatures, these dogmen, were getting more aggressive. They weren't like they used to be. I started reducing my time out there. On my last trip, I was on a blacktop road and noticed signs of a hurried escape. Someone had left their backpack unzipped, with water bottles strewn about. Brand new ones. They made a sharp left toward the parking lot, and the bottles, maybe 6 or 7, were scattered for about 30 feet. There was also a pair of women's white underwear hanging on a small bush. It seemed like a group of teenagers had been caught by surprise, and I figured they saw something that spooked them. On a previous occasion, I went out alone with my cameras to a very active area. After a couple of hours, I started hearing them approach. Sticks breaking, deliberate movements. Usually, they stay just out of sight, like Bigfoot does. But one got too close. Its upper body was hidden by brush, but I saw its legs. It was a dogman. They surrounded me, but I snapped a few photos. One of them, a brown one, came up behind me, about 30 feet away, and looked straight at me from behind a dead log. Another one, possibly the same, was solid white, much bigger, and heading in the same direction. I sensed something was wrong. Unlike previous times, I felt fear creeping in. I didn't want to become a statistic, so I left. My granddaughter had her own unsettling experience. We were walking through a place we called Ambush Alley, due to its narrow road and thick, dark woods on each side. As we approached the end of the stretch, we heard loud sounds from the woods about 12 feet to our left. We had to pass by to reach the car. I reassured Zoe, telling her we meant no harm and were just leaving. As we moved, the creature howled, and my granddaughter, walking on the side closest to it, started shaking like a leaf. I comforted her, saying it wouldn't hurt her, but that was the last time she ever wanted to go into those woods with me. It was the last time I took her out there.
The frost settled over Catoosa County like a shawl as I made my way down the gravel service road. The crunch under my boots was a familiar, steady rhythm, like nature's own percussion to my nightly rounds. Each step echoed in the quiet night, and I couldn't help but savor the warmth radiating from my thermos of hot coffee, which was cradled between my hands. It was like holding the sun itself on these cold November nights. Out in the distance,
The barns were dark silhouettes against the night sky, with stars gleaming so bright you might have thought you could reach up and pluck them from the heavens. The air was crisp, the kind of crisp that bites at your cheeks and nips at your nose. As I wandered along the fence line, I noticed a lone figure moving near the moonlit barrier. It wasn't uncommon for a calf to stray from the herd now and then, and I pegged this one to be no different. I squinted through the chilly haze, trying to make out the form clearer. "Come on now, little one," I muttered, more to myself than anything. "Better get back with the others." But as that figure moved along, I couldn't help but notice it was too fluid, too swift, to be one of my calves. I shook my head and shrugged it off, chalking it up to a play of shadows and my own tired eyes. There was work to be done, critters to count, and a night chill to fend off with another swig of coffee. All seemed well until a sound sliced through the night, causing me to halt mid-step. It was a growl, low and resonant, unlike any creature I knew. My breath hung in little puffs as I stood frozen, ears straining to catch the direction. The frost glittered on the fence posts. I turned, and there it was. The shape, larger now and more indistinct, looming between me and the path back home. Just a shadow, a blot against the moonlit landscape, but it was enough. I took a step back as uncertainty settled over me. Get on out of here," I shouted, urgency in each word as I turned on my heel, boots slipping on the frosted gravel. The chill bit harder now, cutting through my layers, and I broke into a run, each breath catching as I hurried towards the barn. Behind me, the gravel shifted, stones crunching under the creature's pursuit. Although the sound wasn't quite menacing, it was persistent, the rolling grind of grit under something moving with a purpose. Silence might have been a mercy, but it wasn't offered. I stumbled, righting myself just in time to skid past the rusted gate latch, the one that never did work quite right. Moonlight played tricks across the pasture, and those fence posts, so innocent in their frost-covered state, glistened like sentinels watching over the night's commotion. My breath came in bursts, each exhale mingling with the frosty air. I couldn't bring myself to look back. Instead, I kept my eyes on the barn, willing the distance to close faster. But no matter my pace, the figure behind me remained, unyielding. Ahead, those stars, dazzling and bright, felt more like a taunt than a comfort now. They cast everything in a sharp glow, too bright for ignorance, and too stark for imagining things away. I could almost hear the echo of the creature's steps, mingled with my own racing pulse, and the cacophony of owls hooting from the woods beyond, their calls rising over the land like an unholy chorus. And then, just as I dared to hope for sanctuary, the moon's light revealed the figure once more as it swept across the pasture. It moved with a confidence that set my skin prickling, gliding over the frosted earth as if it belonged there, and I was the interloper. That figure, featureless, indistinct, danced across the landscape, implacable as the night itself, marking the final image that lingered. Those glistening fence posts stood witness to our silent standoff, the night's chill closing in around me as the figure continued its pursuit, unrelenting, over the pastures of Catoosa County. I was raised in Cedar Falls, Iowa, located in the northeastern part of the state. At the time of my encounter, I was attending Iowa State University on a track and field scholarship. It was a time of ambition and exploration, my world filled with routines of practice and studies. But everything shifted one particular evening. It was 1981. I had returned to my hometown for a weekend visit. The autumn air was crisp, a prelude to the biting cold of winter yet to come. I decided to take an evening drive to clear my head, a ritual of sorts, along the less traveled back roads surrounding Cedar Falls.
As I drove, the roads became increasingly isolated, the only source of light coming from my car's headlights slicing through the darkness. The tranquility of the countryside was both soothing and unsettling. The cornfields stretched endlessly to either side, a sea of shadows under the cloak of night. Without warning, I saw something on the side of the road. At first, I thought it was a deer, but as I drew closer, my heart pounded with a mix of fear and disbelief. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. The creature stood upright, like a man, but it was covered in dark fur, and its head was unmistakably that of a dog or a wolf. Its eyes glowed in the darkness, catching the light of my car. I slowed down, transfixed, trying to process what I was witnessing. The creature, the Dogman, stared back at me, its presence both compelling and terrifying. It stood motionless for what felt like an eternity, yet was probably just a few seconds. Then, with a swift and fluid motion, it turned and vanished into the cornfields, swallowed by the darkness from which it had emerged. I sat there, hands gripping the wheel, my mind reeling. Was it real? Had I truly seen what I believed I saw? The encounter left an indelible mark, a powerful blend of curiosity and dread.
It all happened on November 15th. My dad and I have a tradition of heading up to camp the day before opening morning, which means arriving on the 14th. That year, my dad had to work on the 14th, a Friday, so he picked me up at 4 p.m. We made our way to camp, unloaded our gear, and settled in for the night. It went as usual. Supper, a couple of beers, but I barely slept since the puppy wouldn't stop bothering me, and drank a lot of water. I got maybe 3 hours of sleep. At 4:30 in the morning, I was already awake when my dad stepped outside to use the bathroom. I got dressed and gathered my gear. As soon as I shut the door behind me, I noticed the dense fog hanging in the air. I always load my rifle once I step outside, a Weatherby 3006 with a nice Nikon scope. I put 4 bullets in the bolt-action rifle and stashed 3 spares in my jacket. I started walking down the road with my headlamp cutting through the fog. The darkness and the mist made it eerie. I reached the path to my blind. It was a cedar swamp, spooky with stumps and puddles and countless cedar trees. I walked about 400 yards down the gravel road, then turned north into the woods for another 350 yards. Once I arrived, the fog seemed to lift, but the woods were still dark. I set up my rifle, unable to see much. As the sky lightened, a doe appeared, and soon after, we both heard something approaching. I thought it might be a buck, but I couldn't see it. Suddenly, a massive wolf sprang into view on the lane in front of the doe. It was enormous, like something out of a nightmare. My first thought was Dogman due to its size. It looked like a wolf, but stood utterly still, not even glancing at me. I watched it for what felt like forever, and my fear began to shift into something else. It seemed almost like a guardian spirit. Then, it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Shaken, I called my dad, managing to get through before my phone died. Having someone to talk to made me feel a bit better, and I decided to stay. While watching the doe through my scope, a creature rose beside it. It materialized from nowhere, transforming into an upright canine, a dogman, unmistakably. I froze in terror. It was completely black, maybe 6 to 6.5 feet tall, very muscular, and it didn't have a tail that I could see. When it stood,
I was on edge, but it didn't move immediately. Then it walked away from me, looking frustrated, swinging its arms as it stomped. It swung an arm at the doe, but didn't hit it. Before leaving, it turned its head quickly and glared at me with an angry look. I was petrified, gripping my rifle, praying it didn't turn my way. It continued down the lane, then leaped at a cedar tree, grabbed it, and vaulted onto a limb overhead, vanishing into the branches. I kept my scope on where it disappeared, trying to decide what to do. Eventually, I knew I had to leave. I needed to stay calm and walk away without panicking. As I walked, I heard something pacing me in the woods. It was unsettling, and panic was creeping up on me. I stopped and shouted into the woods, declaring I was leaving and warning not to come onto the lane, or I might shoot out of fear. After a tense pause, I started moving again, and the sounds faded. Finally reaching the road felt like reaching safety. The trip back to camp was uneventful, though my heart pounded the whole way. I rushed inside, breathless, adrenaline coursing through me, and recounted everything to my dad. He listened, but seemed skeptical, drifting into his theories about interdimensional creatures. Feeling a need for understanding, I turned to someone who might actually believe me.
Every morning started the same, with a steaming cup of coffee from Miss Lillian's diner, the warmth seeping into my fingers as I stepped out into the crisp November air. The brew was a comfort against the cold, a familiar companion before my nightly inspections of the Choctaw County tracks. Those rails had been my life for 20 years, each curve and bump as known to me as my own hands. Tonight was no different. I finished my coffee, tossed the cup into the back of my Chevy Silverado, and adjusted my thick boots. The air nipped at my nose, and the gravel chewed at the soles of my boots as I set off. There was the old scarecrow again, propped against the fence line. That ragged figure always made me chuckle, standing sentinel like it had a purpose beyond forgotten field duty. As I walked, the moonlight played over the rusty tracks, casting shadows that flickered and danced. It was then that I noticed something odd about the scarecrow. It seemed closer, somehow. I paused, rubbing my eyes. Must be the shadows playing tricks, I thought. I shook my head and continued. But there was a rustle this time, coming from its direction. My footfalls stilled, and I turned, expecting nothing more than the usual wind through branches. But it was different, a sound not in harmony with the night's usual whispers. I took a step back, the gravel crunching underfoot echoing in the quiet. There, at the edge of the tracks, stood a figure resembling a scarecrow, with limbs jutting at odd angles and a posture that defied balance. Moonlight caught where eyes should have been, and they held it. My throat tightened, hands fumbling for the work radio clipped to my belt. My gloved fingers felt clumsy on the knobs as I tried to call for backup, or just a reassuring voice in the dark. The radio crackled with static. I twisted the dial, hoping for clarity, but all I got were distorted voices, garbled and mocking. Every breath came shallow as I glanced back at the creature. It remained still, its silhouette stark against the moonlit expanse, unmoving but for the faintest suggestion of a shuffle, a shift of weight. The radio offered no comfort, only the noise of laughter made jagged by the interference. I let it drop to my side, the weight of it a reminder of its failure. An owl hooted, its call echoing off the metal and wood, a solemn sound that seemed to wrap around us both in the chill. I stood rooted, feeling chilled despite the layers, despite the coffee's residual heat. That eerie silhouette remained, a constant in the shifting shadows, and I knew the tracks under my boots could no longer be the only thing to inspect. There was an unknown element pressing against the edge of consciousness, undemanding, yet unmistakable in its presence.
All that was left was the owl calling in the dark, and the certainty that the scarecrow had never been a scarecrow. When I was a kid, I loved to explore the woods near my home. I must have been around 6 years old, tiny for my age. I wasn't allowed to walk on the highway, but I knew the woods like the back of my hand and found paths that took me where I wanted to go. That day, I wasn't heading to a friend's house. I was just out, enjoying the nature I adored. I was searching for fossils along a creek with a steep embankment on one side. The day was hot, and I was a rambunctious kid, splashing through the water, not being quiet at all. As I rounded a curve, the world seemed to stop. Just a few feet away, an oddly shaped timber wolf was staring directly at me. My heart was thundering. I could feel it in my fingertips. Time froze. I noticed little details. It didn't stand like any dog I'd seen. The fur around its shoulders was thick, almost fluffy, and its forearms were oddly long. As a small child, its paws looked enormous, almost gripping the rocks beneath it. I was in shock, unable to breathe or move, as it stared into my soul, poised to attack. Then, its expression softened, its body relaxed, and I felt a little safer. It backed up slightly, broke eye contact to drink from the creek, then turned and disappeared into the woods. A short time later, one night that same summer, I was startled awake. There it was again, that strangely shaped wolf, staring at me from the darkness. Its eyes glistened in the night, a coffee gold, beautiful yet terrifying. It felt predatory, and I froze, unable to call for my parents. My room was on the second floor, overlooking the living room and kitchen. I began hearing subtle noises throughout the house, and a strange intuition told me there were more of these creatures nearby. I lay there, still as a statue, convinced I had to respond correctly to avoid danger. The creature softened, looking almost curious, then stood up on two legs. Suddenly, everything about it seemed proportional, and I realized that was why it looked so awkward on all fours. I maintained my silence, recalling advice about showing no fear to predators. Eventually, the creature just walked away, leaving the house silent. I remained in bed, petrified, until daylight, when I finally dashed to my parents, trembling and sobbing. I told them about the wolves, the ones that had been in our home. Even now, I think of them as a strange, organized group, with intentions unknown.
I run overnight road patrol for the county during storm season. The job is what it sounds like. Drive the secondary roads after heavy rain, check culverts, flag washouts, drop barricades if a shoulder drops. Most nights, nothing happens. You drink coffee, you listen to the same 4 radio stations fade in and out, and you write down that the road was fine at 2:14 a.m. and fine again at 3:47. The storm that Tuesday put 2 inches down in 40 minutes. The dispatch board lit up with reports from residents. Standing water at CR 12, soft shoulder on 218, a tree across the eastbound lane near the grain co-op. I took the south loop, which meant the low sections that drain into Archer Creek. CR 218 runs through a stretch of row crop for about 3 miles before it dips into a tree line along the creek bottom. The culvert there is a 48-inch corrugated steel pipe, older than my truck, and it gets packed with debris every time the creek runs fast. My supervisor had flagged it twice that season already. I reached the dip at 1:40 a.m. My headlights caught the water sheeting across the road from the east side, which meant the culvert was either slowing or fully blocked. I pulled the truck onto the gravel shoulder and left the amber flashers running. Outside, the air smelled like wet clay and cut corn. The field to my left had been harvested down to stubble. The tree line sat 80 yards ahead, where the road fell toward the creek. My boots sank an inch into the shoulder mud as I walked to the ditch edge with my flashlight.
The culvert inlet was a third blocked with stock debris and a mat of wet leaves. Not critical yet, but I had a clearing rod in the truck bed. I went back and pulled it out. I was working the rod into the debris when I heard something in the field behind me. A single step. Heavy. The stubble crackled once under the weight, then went quiet. I held still and listened. The creak noise covered most of what was behind me. Frogs along the tree line. The tick of my flashers. I told myself it was a coyote cutting through the field and went back to the culvert. Another step. Slower this time. Then a third. Whatever it was, it moved with intention. I straightened and turned around. It stood at the edge of my headlight reach, maybe 60 feet into the field. Tall. The shoulders sat high and wide, the way a man's do when he's bracing weight. Except nothing about this thing had a man's proportions below the shoulders. The arms hung too long. The head sat forward on the neck in that animal way, muzzle out, ears up. Its legs carried the thick, dense look of something built for sudden movement. It watched me. I did not run, because my truck was 30 feet to my left, and I was not going to cross open ground with my back to it. I turned my flashlight beam toward it, slow. The light caught the fur along its chest and shoulders. Dark, coarse, water-heavy. Its eyes returned the beam in a flat, amber shine. It breathed slow, ribs rising. The mouth closed. It took one step forward, placing the foot careful in the stubble, like it weighed the sound. I moved toward my truck door without turning my back to it. My hand found the handle on the first try. I climbed in and pulled the door shut hard. The thing did not move toward me. It stood in the field and watched the truck. I sat with the engine idling, hand on the gear selector, watching it through the windshield. Then it lifted one arm. Slow, elbow bending, the hand rising until one finger extended. Not at me, past me. Down the road, south, toward the next low section where CR 218 crosses a smaller drainage ditch about a quarter mile away. The arm held for a moment. Then it lowered. The thing stepped back twice, smooth and quiet, and turned toward the tree line. It moved into the trees, and the dark took it. I sat there for a while. My hands held the wheel without me telling them to. Then I put the truck in drive and went south. The secondary culvert at the low crossing was fully blocked. The water had already crested the road edge and was moving across the asphalt in a steady sheet. Another 30 minutes, and the shoulder would have given, and a section of the road would have dropped into the ditch. I flagged both ends, called it in, and waited for the crew. In my written report, I noted debris blockage on 2 culverts and recommended emergency maintenance on the south crossing. I noted arrival time, water depth, and barricade placement. I did not note what pointed me there. I have thought about it since, whether it was territorial, whether it wanted me out of its field, whether it knew what the blocked culvert would do to the road, and the road meant something to it, whether it was warning me or just done with me. I don't have an answer. I drive that stretch 3 nights a week now. Every time I slow at the first dip and check both shoulders before I step out. The field is always empty when I look. I first saw the Dogman roughly 20 years ago. Back then, he was about my height or just a bit taller. I thought he was young, but after other experiences, I believe he's been here all along. Maybe he can change his size as he appears to me. That's the best way I can describe it. I saw him again last year, on May 27th, and now he's absolutely massive. He emerged from a woodland on the right side of me, crossing a track right in front of me. For a few seconds, I was absolutely terrified. He must stand 6 feet at the shoulder now, and that was on all fours. He looked me in the eyes, but didn't speak to me out loud. Instead, he communicated in my mind, telling me not to fear him. He shared his name and some other things, but those are private between us. Later on, he came back into the woods behind me. There were loud cracks on trees, one just 6 feet away, yet I didn't see him. I've had him walk up to me at night when I'm out with my horse. It's scary, not knowing what's more frightening, seeing something like that or not seeing it and knowing it's right there. On one occasion, he got so close I could feel his energy. I braced myself for a sound, a huff or snort in my face, but there was nothing. I believe he could have easily hurt me or my animals, but he hasn't. I've come to think of him as a guardian of this ancient place that I love. I feel he knows I'm connected to this land. He's watched me grow up. When I'm in the woods, I talk to him out loud, thanking him for keeping me and my dog safe. He's massive, and if he stood upright, he'd be at least 10 feet tall. I believe he didn't stand up during our encounters because he knew I couldn't handle it. A creature that size, even telling you not to fear, would be overwhelming. There's also another one, a black one. I've had 2 encounters with her. I say her because she appeared to have breasts, not like a human's, but they were there. She's tall, slim, and absolutely jet black. Once, she walked past our sitting room window while my dad and I were watching TV. I'm not sure if she's jealous of the relationship I have with the other one. I suspect he looks after me from either her or something else. My mom had 2 encounters, one of which I mentioned before. I've had 2 encounters with him and 2 with the female. Maybe that's it for me. Maybe I'll never see them again. It's incredible to witness these things, yet they are the ultimate monsters, not meant to exist. It makes you wonder what's out there, walking beside you, without you knowing, until it chooses to show itself. This experience has changed my life. I've done research, explored different ideas, and opened myself up to many possibilities. It's been a very interesting journey, keeping me on my toes.
One of my first encounters was during a deer hunting trip. I saw what I thought was a wolf, which was odd because there weren't supposed to be any wolves in that part of the state. As it got closer, I realized there was something off about it. It was broad daylight, yet the creature had red eyes, which definitely wasn't normal. Looking through the scope, I noticed its extremely large feet. This one was jet black. When it spotted me and opened its mouth to growl, I could see the inside of its mouth was black, and its canine teeth were exceptionally long. It came within 20 yards of me in my tree stand. I had a .243 high-powered rifle, but everything about this creature made me uncomfortable about taking the shot. It had unusually long legs and huge feet. When it left, it bolted like a horse at a gallop. After a couple of hours, I got down from the tree stand and realized it had circled it, leaving a footprint in the mud almost the size of a paper plate. A year and a half, maybe 2 years later, I was ginseng hunting when I ran into it again in the woods. This time, it was standing on a rock bluff, looking down at me. It was black, with a buckskin color on one side of its hair, red eyes, and it was big. It circled me with its head low, moving on all fours. I was cautious since I only had a small caliber pistol, so I eased out of the woods. It flanked me as I got across a cut hayfield to my car. As I approached my vehicle, this massive creature pushed down on it with one paw on the windshield and the other on the driver's side window, cracking the glass. I hit the horn, backed up, turned around, and eventually managed to sling it off after exiting the hayfield.
It followed me home. That night, my yard dog, part mountain cur, came to the back porch, signaling someone or something was outside. Stepping out with a light, I saw this thing with glowing red eyes, terrifying my dog. An hour or two later, the dog barked again when I heard a high-pitched sound, similar to, but deeper than a coyote. My dog ran back into the house, acting strangely, indicating something was circling the property. Eventually, I stepped outside and saw it again, letting off a shot as it ran off on two legs, its muscular structure human-like. It seemed startled by my firing, but I didn't see it again that night. In another instance, at Standing Stone State Park, I was with some guys when we heard what initially sounded like coyotes, but with a deeper, unusual tone. We saw red eyes at a height that didn't match coyotes. Surrounded by these creatures, we spotted one crossing a creek branch in front of us on two legs. We backed up toward each other for protection, trying to make a strategic retreat. When we reached the barn, we realized one had gotten inside, but it was too risky to engage it there, so we retreated to the house. After some shooting to scare it off, I returned 2 days later and found tracks with claw marks, confirming our suspicions. A year later, I heard from a neighbor who had an encounter while checking on cattle. I went back to the area using a coyote puppy call and got responses that attracted a large upright creature into view, which we later treed. We shot around it with birdshot to drive it away, and it eventually left. My most recent encounter, about a month ago, involved a Dogman pup I found while exploring a wide trail. I picked it up from a vine, noting its strange features like clear eyes and a peculiar jaw structure. Realizing the mother might be nearby, I left the pup and moved to a higher vantage point up the mountain. Later, after crossing a fence, a large creature easily stepped over it. I fired a warning shot, but it remained unfazed. I sought refuge in an old house, losing it after a tense period of being followed. Staying vigilant, I took an alternate route home to ensure I wasn't followed again.
I woke up at 3 this morning, about the same time every day, to get my coffee fix at the diner before hitting the road. The folks there know me by now. No need to tell them I want it black and strong. It was the usual crowd. A couple of old-timers talking about the weather and the miners up north. The first sip hit me like a familiar friend, spreading warmth through the cold sting of early morning. I lingered just long enough to let the caffeine settle before heading out to the truck. You can hear the wind howling through the trees on the drive up, and it ain't even light yet. The air's crisp with that fall bite, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. Plenty of times I've wished the day's work was already behind me when I pull up to the site. I hate how the equipment's always given me trouble. Seems like there's always something that needs fixin'. Ain't nothing worse than climbing into the cab and finding it's all stiff from the night chill. The truck's got this old, oily smell, one that lingers on my clothes long after I'm home. The logging site was nestled deep in the woods, a place you'd miss if you didn't know the roads, like Forest Service Road 550. I parked and noticed some movement near the equipment, a creature moving deliberately around the John Deere skidder. At first, I figured it was just a big stray dog, maybe scrounging for food scraps left by the crew. You get used to seeing deer now and again, trying not to spook them off the road. I've learned to look out for bears too, though they usually ain't much interested in us. But this one wasn't acting right, not like a dog should. It didn't scare off when I clanked the truck door shut, just stayed there, watching. Goosebumps formed on my skin, the kind you get when everything seems too quiet. The forest was silent too, like it was holding its breath. I started to walk toward it, thinking maybe I could shoo it off before it caused any mischief. The thing didn't flinch, didn't move at all. I stopped in my tracks when a low growl rolled out of the shadows, deeper than any dog should have been, echoing through the stillness of the trees. In that moment, the creature moved into the dim edge of dawn, and I felt a jolt of pure instinctive fear. Its size was not quite right, its movements unnatural. My hand twitched toward my pocket, feeling for the keys. The creature's eyes were locked on mine, filled with an unsettling intelligence. I figured I ought to back away, real slow, towards the truck. My breath came cold and fast in the air, and I could barely feel my fingers grappling around those keys. I had to keep my eyes on it, whatever it was, had to make sure it didn't decide to come closer. But the keys slipped from my nerveless hand, tumbling into the mud with a soft splash. My mind went blank, that instant when you realize you've done the one thing you couldn't afford to do. The creature's eyes never wavered, locked onto me with an eerie stillness. I stood frozen, not daring to move, not daring to breathe more than a shallow pant through my nose. The woods seemed to close in around me, the world silent except for that faint rustle in the leaves and the creature's unwavering gaze. My heart pounded heavily, a steady beat in the vast quiet. Then came the sound that broke the stillness, a howl, rising from deep within the creature's chest, slicing through the air with a raw, primal force. It echoed off the trees, a mournful cry that carried far beyond where I stood, raising the hairs on my neck. As it faded, the dim light of dawn did not seem to lessen the intensity in its eyes, and the world hung in the balance there, at the edge of the forest. Not another sound but my ragged breathing, and those eyes, watching, waiting. I tell you, nothing beats that first sip of coffee from the thermos as the grain comes pouring in. The truck's heater hummed in a gentle rhythm, a welcome companion in the chill of late October, while old country tunes crackled over the radio. These songs have a way of grounding me, even if it feels like the same five are on repeat. Out here in eastern Montana, you learn to appreciate the quiet, but boy, it can get lonely. The truck rumbled to a stop near the abandoned farmstead silo, the headlights cutting through the pressing dark. I stretched a bit, feeling the cold wind nip at me as I climbed out to check up on things. Grain dust is something fierce, gets in every crack and crevice, but that's just part of the job. My boots crunched on the dry earth as I made my way toward the silo, the earth smelling rich and familiar, like the scent after a fresh rain. That's when I saw it, a large silhouette rifling through the trash left by the silo. At first, I thought it was just a stray dog, out here scavenging for a meal. I squinted, taking another sip of my coffee, watching as it moved with a strange, deliberate pace. These old country tunes keep me awake on these long nights, though I swear they play the same 5 songs over and over. Just as I was about to dismiss it as some stray looking for food, the dog stood up on 2 legs, lingering for a moment before darting into the shadows. I blinked hard, chalking it up to fatigue and the tricks it sometimes plays on the eyes. Farmers sure can be picky about moisture levels. Sometimes feels like we're splitting hairs, so sleep doesn't always come easy during harvest. The sound of muffled growls and an odd scratching resonated from inside the silo. I paused, feeling the moment catch in my throat. Maybe it was just some raccoons or a porcupine making a mess of things. But despite my disbelief, the noises wouldn't quit. I approached the silo slowly, scanning the area. Ain't nothing like the sound of the silo creaking in the night. It's an old kind of song. But tonight, something felt off. The wind carried a chill that seeped through my jacket, tugging at my resolve. That cold wind cuts right through you, makes me grateful for the truck's heater. Suddenly, near the silo door, a shadowy figure emerged, towering over and draped in matted fur. The sight of it stunned me, my heart pounding, almost drowning out even the creaking metal. Grain dust might be relentless,
But whatever this was defied explanation. A wave of panic hit me. Hands unsteady, I fumbled for my phone, hoping to get enough of a signal to call for help. But with my hands trembling, it was like trying to grip a live fish. My fingers betrayed me, and the phone slipped, shattering on the hard ground beneath. I cursed under my breath. Without any way to reach out, I felt cut off. Fort Peck's just a stone's throw away, but I hardly get there because the silos keep me plenty busy. Now, though, that distance seemed unreachable. The truck's headlights flickered, casting odd shadows that danced and blurred under the vast, open sky. For just a second, in that pale light, I caught sight of eyes reflecting the light before they vanished, leaving nothing but the restless hum of the truck and the specter of the old country tune whispering on the wind. Every night shift starts with a good cup of joe from Fran's Diner. That place is like a second home to me. The lights inside were warm, casting a friendly glow on the checkered floor, and I was the only one there at that hour, as usual. Fran slid a steaming mug across the counter with a knowing smile, and I savored the first sip, dark and rich, feeling the warmth spread through me. It was the kind of coffee that kick-started a night, no matter how quiet it got on those long northern Michigan roads. People don't realize how quiet northern Michigan gets at 2 in the morning. Just the hum of my truck and maybe a rustle in the leaves. I navigated my Dodge Ram tow truck down the empty lanes, where the night seemed to swallow everything beyond the headlights. The gravel crunches different under the tires when it's cold, like it's sharper or something. It's hard to explain. The air had that crisp bite, the kind that whispers of a storm lurking on the horizon. As I turned onto an old, abandoned farm road, I spotted what seemed to be an overgrown deer tangled up by the fence. I slowed to a crawl, peering through the windshield, but the headlights didn't quite reveal everything. The forest around here is thick, and during autumn, the colors just explode. But it makes the roads a mess with all the fallen branches. Maybe it was just shadows playing tricks under the moonlight. I rubbed my eyes and carried on, the radio murmuring one of those same old songs I couldn't stand. But it did the job of keeping me awake. The back of my neck prickled, like the sensation when a cold draft sneaks under your collar. The haunting sound sliced through the night, unlike any animal I knew, and the hairs on my arms stood on end. I pulled the truck to a stop, the engine idling low, and listened. Some nights you can see the Milky Way real clear, which makes the long hauls kind of peaceful. But this was not one of those nights. Cutting the engine, I stepped out, flashlight in hand, and approached the shape near the fence. The woods were eerily silent, like they were holding their breath. The beam of light caught the eyes of the creature, and they reflected back at me, unsettlingly intelligent. My breathing was ragged, each inhale labored and uneven. Around here, you get used to folks being mostly good, but there are moments that make you question all your certainties. I backed away, heart pounding like a hammer against my ribs, until I reached the truck. My fingers fumbled the radio dial, desperate to call for backup. But the radio hissed with static, spitting in and out as if mocking my efforts. The engine, faithful until now, sputtered and died, leaving me stranded there, a lone figure in the oppressive darkness. In the rearview mirror, a silhouette shifted against the moonlit road. I sat frozen, gripping the steering wheel like a lifeline, as the autumn wind carried leaves across the road. My best friend Sam and I had a strange history with the creature we referred to as the Dogman. It all started one night under a full moon when Sam was younger and riding his bicycle. He swore he saw it down by the railroad tracks at the old dump, some kind of werewolf or whatever it was. Sam got so spooked he wouldn't go out after dark, And even when we got older and had our driver's licenses, he refused to stop the car to pee unless we were under a street light. It became a running joke between us, though a strange one, and we'd always end up driving around whenever the full moon hung in the sky. One night, we were out cruising, and Sam stuck to his routine of only stopping for a streetlight. Annoyed, I suggested we go find whatever it was he'd seen. We didn't see anything that night, but when I dropped him off and headed home, something happened. Traveling down the highway, I hit it with my car, barreling along at 70 miles an hour. I knocked the creature off the road, but it didn't seem to hurt it much. Black hair got jammed into my bumper, which I collected and stuffed into a chip bag. That bag still sits in the car, out at the shop. This peculiar routine of ours became a sort of game. Whenever the moon was full, we'd take to the roads to hunt for the creature. Most times, we'd see nothing. But on one such night, it was me, Sam, Tyler, and Aaron driving down Wellington Road. Out of nowhere, the thing ran across the road to our left. Tyler, terrified, pulled out an AR-15. It had a flashlight and a laser, and when he pointed it at the creature, its eyes glowed red. We took off like bats out of hell. Tyler was too scared to shoot, dropping the gun in panic. As we continued down the road, something darted into the woods to our left again, and it freaked us out. Once Tyler got everyone dropped off, I was the last. He swore we were pulling a prank on him, convinced we had someone dressed in a gorilla suit scheming against him. And then there was a night on Mathias Lane, where it dead ends. It was spooky. I accidentally put a cigarette out in a Mountain Dew can. Sam, not realizing, took a swig from that can and almost threw up. He tossed the can out the window, and we heard it hit the woods. But as we turned around at the dead end and drove back, that can was sitting right there in the road. We didn't see anything or anyone, but it was unsettling. Yet again, under the full moon, the werewolf Dogman seemed to haunt us. My brother saw it once too. He said it was a bear, but we don't have bears around here. There was one last time I encountered it, and it was too close to comfort. I saw it in my yard. That deeply unsettled me. Seeing it on the back roads was one thing. Those places weren't my home. But finding it in my side yard was too much. From that moment on, the game stopped being a game for me. It became something real, something serious.
I should probably start by saying we had a family farm, one my grandparents lived on their whole lives. Dad grew up there, and when my grandparents moved into town, Dad and I took over. I spent a lot of my childhood there, even before we moved. It wasn't a heavily wooded area like you hear about in other stories. This was farmland, with some trees around and woods not too far off. There was a pasture for the cattle we raised, and the north side of the farm was a grove we planted later. But back then, it was just a field. There was this grassy hill in the field I called an island, which used to be a bigger hill. Once, a cemetery had been there, but the bodies got moved and the land was leveled out. This happened in winter, probably during winter break. Grandma had my cousin and me over for the weekend. We'd played in the snow all day, building forts and having snowball fights. After a fun, peaceful day, we had dinner with my grandparents and wound down. Grandma set up a mattress for my cousin in the living room, and I slept on the couch. We went to bed around 9, I think. I'd been asleep a while when I woke up to a noise, probably between 1 and 2 in the morning. It was the sound of the latch on the back door, like the screen door opening. I thought it might be Dad. He was nearby earlier, and maybe he decided to stay at Grandma's with us. I heard heavy footsteps coming through the back room. There was another door between that room and where I was, and I couldn't see anything, but the footsteps had a weight to them, like Dad's steel-toe boots, so it seemed normal. But then I watched the doorknob start to turn, and the door slowly opened. There were no lights on, but moonlight from the snow lit up the room. And standing there in the doorframe wasn't my dad.
This thing filled the whole door frame, which was probably about 7 feet tall. It had wide shoulders and a hairy body. The fur was dark, maybe black or really dark brown, long and shaggy, like a long-haired German shepherd. It had long forearms and hands with thumbs, which it used to open the door. The face looked like a German shepherd's too, with a wide snout and tall, pointed ears. I couldn't be sure about the eye color. They might have been yellow, but in the dim light and being partially colorblind, it was hard to tell. The creature walked in, and I couldn't see the bottoms of its feet, but they were the canine kind, with hocked legs. It looked at my cousin sleeping on the floor, and its eyes seemed locked on him. I was 9, sitting frozen on the couch, thinking this had to be a werewolf. And then it looked up and saw me. We locked eyes, and for a moment, both of us were frozen. It felt like forever, but was probably only 5 or 10 seconds. Then, without breaking eye contact, it started backing out, moving the same way it came in, step by step. It reached out with its long arm and closed the door, breaking our gaze. I heard it walking back through the room at the same slow pace. It opened and closed the doors behind it, just like a human would. That struck me as odd for a werewolf because it seemed so normal. But it left. I sat there, still frozen, staring into the darkness where it had been, trying to make sense of it. I stayed awake almost the whole night, trying to process what I'd seen. In the morning, I rushed to my grandma and told her everything. She dismissed it as a bad dream, but I was determined to prove it. My cousin, who didn't question what I saw, helped me figure it out. We put on our snow gear and went outside to look for evidence. The snow near the door was too packed down from us playing, but further back on the property, in the area with tall pine trees where an old sod house used to be, we found prints. They were canine but enormous, bigger than any dog or wolf print I'd seen. I showed my grandma, but she still shrugged it off, thinking it must have been a dog or coyote. Frustrated, I continued investigating and walked out to the grassy island in the field. There, I found a den dug into the earth. It wasn't visible from a distance. I didn't go in, but I knew I had found something. I reported it back, but again, it wasn't taken seriously. Later that season, the island was plowed over, the den gone. I wondered if Grandpa had checked it out and decided to get rid of whatever was there. I guess I'll never really know.
I live in Frederick, Maryland, but I frequently visit Hartford County too. My sister is our mother's main caretaker. Mom is old and suffers from dementia, so my sister, who retired from the military, takes care of her, which is a demanding task. I often come up after work to give my sister a break. This all happened around Hartford County, near Gunpowder State Park, with its many tributaries leading down to the Chesapeake Bay. The area has a history of strange creature sightings. I usually leave for work early, around 3:15 or 3:20 a.m., and that's when I think about possibly seeing one of these creatures. However, my experience didn't unfold like that. My work schedule changed, and I ended up working a late evening shift into the early morning. I was leaving around 3 p.m. to get to the job site by 5. As I was pulling out of her development onto the road, I stopped at a stop sign and prepared to turn right. When I looked to my left, I noticed movement that caught my eye. Initially, I thought it was a bear, given the shiny black fur. I've encountered black bears before, so this seemed plausible. This spot where I saw the animal crossing is a narrow strip of woods between houses and developments. I don't know the area well, but I've seen lots of deer trails there. Once, my sister and I nearly hit a deer while driving back from the store as a whole herd crossed the road. It's a known wildlife corridor. When I looked left and saw the creature, I first assumed it was a bear, but it wasn't. Upon closer inspection, it was clear it was a canine, a dog. Seeing a dog crossing a road isn't unusual, but this particular sighting grabbed my attention. It intrigued me enough that I turned left instead of right to see if I could spot it again, but it was gone. Despite continuing to work, the image of this dog stuck in my mind. I wondered why it was nagging at me. Maybe I should have mentioned this earlier, but I've been in the military and trained in observation. This skill lets me notice things quickly, imprint them, and process them later. I've also worked with rescue dogs, mainly German Shepherds, Rottweilers, Great Danes, and others. With years of experience, I've seen large dogs. My own 100-pound German Shepherd stands 24 inches at the shoulder, and I've measured him several times for reference. Trying to estimate the distance, I figured it was around 300 meters where I saw the dog. I've seen my dog at similar distances, and he looks tiny. But this creature dwarfed him. It didn't seem possible for a dog to be that big from that distance. At one point, I listened to another Marylander's encounter who described a similar creature with a bushy tail, just like what I saw. The tail started with short hair at the base, becoming longer and bushier towards the end. I never saw the creature's head, only from the shoulders back, due to the road's curve and the trees. It occupied nearly half the 20-foot road, almost 10 feet. I'm not claiming the animal was 10 feet long, but it was far larger than any dog I'd ever seen. Even accounting for other large breeds, it was inexplicably enormous. Because it was afternoon, I didn't immediately realize what I might have seen. I didn't jump to conclusions. I saw it, tried to locate it again, and continued on my way. Yet, as I processed it, I couldn't help but think about how unnatural it seemed. Seeing bears or coyotes is usually a memorable and pleasant encounter. This was different. I kept returning to it mentally. I'm not saying it was a dogman, but the creature was an unusually large canine crossing the road. Unlike other wildlife sightings, this encounter stayed with me, unsettling in its abnormality. What I saw was not natural, and it continues to occupy significant space in my mind.
I tell ya, nothing quite like driving through eastern Oregon in November. The air's crisp and the roads are mostly empty at this hour. The stars stretch out across the sky like a sparkling blanket, and I'm alone on Highway 20. Just the hum of my Peterbilt 379 and the gentle lull of the engine to keep me company. Burns ain't much, but it sure is a sight when you come rolling in out of the dark. I always make it a point to stop at the diner just off Highway 20, the same one twice a week. Folks there know me by now. Makes the coffee taste better. It's got that smell, you know? Bacon and stale cigarette smoke. The cook looks like he ain't left the kitchen in years, but he knows how to fry up some eggs that'll stick with you on the road. As I pulled into the rest area, I noticed some other rigs parked with their engines idling, the low rumble mingling with the wind. Can't hear myself think sometimes with all that noise. I stepped out of the cab, letting the cool autumn breeze nip at the back of my neck as I headed towards the diner. Outside, a large silhouette caught my eye near the trash bags. At first, I figured it was just a stray dog, rummaging through the garbage. You see all sorts out here. Not unusual to see wild creatures sniffing around for scraps. I dismissed it, thinking it was nothing more than a big mutt looking for a late-night snack. But then it moved, quick and sharp, like it skipped across the ground without truly touching it. It let out a low growl that seemed to vibrate through the air. I shook my head, rubbed my eyes. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. Long drives can do that to a person, play tricks on the eyes and ears. I was about to head inside for that much-needed coffee when I heard it. A strange howl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. I paused, feeling a tingling under the denim of my jacket. The sound was too unsettling to belong to any dog I knew. It was as if the very night was calling out. The creature shifted closer,
and it didn't look right. Its eyes glowed with a harsh light, the kind that cut through the darkness with sharp clarity. Its shape was all wrong, grotesque even. I couldn't quite grasp it, like my mind was fighting against understanding. It stood there, directly in front of me, beyond any explanation I could manage. My breath caught, and without thinking, I backed up towards my truck, the keys clutched hard in my hand. I fumbled with the door as I flung it open and scrambled inside. My hands trembled as I turned the key, hoping the engine would roar to life. The Peterbilt came to life, ready to carry me far from whatever I'd seen. As I mashed the pedal to the floor, the truck lurched forward, tires kicking up gravel as I sped out of the rest area. I glanced out the window, hoping to see nothing but the blur of night. But there it was. The creature kept pace with surreal ease, running alongside with a speed that seemed unnatural. I gripped the wheel tight, eyes darting between the road ahead and the mirrors. My breath came in short bursts as the truck finally pulled away, leaving the rest area and that thing behind in the dust. But just as I thought I might be safe, I saw it again in the rearview mirror. The creature stood on two legs now, watching as I disappeared into the night, its eyes still glowing in the darkness.
I always kept my thermos of coffee close, because these cold northern nights in Huron County could seep into your bones. The routine of making my rounds in the remote rail yard had become second nature by now. The smell of diesel and creosote clung to me like a second skin. The wind off Lake Huron cut right through, and I could feel it sting my face sharply. The rails had a rhythm to them, almost like a heartbeat. A hum in the quiet that seemed to be broken by the distant call of a train or the rustle of leaves. Most nights, it was me and the stars, a sight more folks ought to see, even if it was annoying when the equipment acted up as I was about to call it a night. As I clutched my thermos, feeling the warmth seep into my hands, I noticed something in the moonlight. Off to the side, where the tracks curved into the trees, there it was. What looked like a deer tangled in the rail equipment. Round here, you gotta keep your wits about you. And I dismissed it at first, thinking it was just another one of nature's little messes I'd have to sort out before heading home. But something was off. The deer started thrashing in a way that didn't seem right. Initially, I chalked it up to the wind or shadows playing tricks on me. So I tightened my grip on the thermos, the steam rising in the cold night air. Then came a noise. A low, guttural noise echoed through the yard, too deep and resonant for any deer I knew. It froze me in place, the sound vibrating in my chest like the hum of the rails. My breath came out in sharp bursts, hanging like small clouds. Face to face with the creature now, I knew for certain it wasn't a deer. Eyes in the moonlight, catching the glow and throwing it back. Its form shifted, upright, wrong. My chest went tight. My hands were almost too stiff to hold the thermos. I fumbled for my radio, fingers clumsy from the cold as I tried to call for help, the wind whipping around me. The radio buzzed in my hand, but static responded, a hiss that filled the silence. The creature's presence loomed closer, and I realized my escape route was blocked. Backing away inch by inch, the creature's eyes never left mine. The sound was the whisper of the wind moving through the yard, rustling leaves and carrying that same smell of diesel and creosote. My breath came in gasps, the cold air burning my throat, every muscle braced. The steel beneath my boots felt solid, steadfast, though everything else was uncertain. There was a certain peace that came with the solitude of maintaining these tracks, but at that moment,
It was the solitude that had me. I backed away until the creature's eyes were all I could see, glinting in the darkness, holding me in its thrall as the night stretched on. The wind bowing trees like old men at the mercy of a storm. The chill in the air tonight made everything feel a little sharper, like the sound of a train whistle cutting through the trees. I was out in the rail yard, trying to adjust a stubborn switch. The switchgear had been acting up for a few days now, and the racket it made was like nails sliding down a chalkboard. It was enough to make any switchman want to pack up and call it a night. But with the southbound freight running late, I had to hang around longer than planned. As I wrestled with the gear, I couldn't help but admire the vibrant autumn leaves. The maple trees standing guard on the outskirts of the yard were ablaze with fiery reds and bright oranges. It was a sight that never got old, even out here where there weren't a lot of folks around, just a few farmers and the odd hunter. Just as I gave the switch a final yank, I heard a rustling in the bushes nearby. I looked up, expecting to see one of those runaway calves from a neighbor's farm. It wouldn't have been the first time a critter made its way down to the tracks, curious or lost. The noise was familiar, comforting in its own way against the backdrop of the quiet Indiana night. But the rustling was followed by something else, low and unsettling, almost like a growl. It didn't line up with any livestock sound I'd ever heard. I paused, one hand still on the lever, and listened. The growl came again, tensing my muscles with an instinctual alertness that had little to do with the cold. I squinted into the trees, scanning the shadows between the trunks. A large, dark figure shifted there, moving with a nimbleness that belied its size. Certainly no calf, or even a deer. It weaved in and out of the moonlight, a creature with elongated limbs and a sinewy build. I took a step back, my boots slipping a bit on the slick, leaf-covered ground. Then it emerged, barely stepping into the moonlight, just enough for me to see it had unnaturally long limbs and eyes that seemed to catch the light, glowing ever so slightly. My chest tightened. I backed away, each move deliberate, my heart thumping with urgency. I fumbled for the old conductor's lantern I'd stuck in my pack earlier. It was from 1929, a real beauty I'd added to my vintage collection just last week. The cold metal felt reassuring in my hands as I tried to light it, hoping to signal for help or maybe scare off the creature lurking in the dark. But in my haste, the lantern slipped from my fingers, smashing onto the tracks below. Glass shattered, and the soothing glow of the flame snuffed out in an instant, leaving me in thick, tar-like darkness. I cursed under my breath, with the absence of sound now draped heavily over the yard. In the pitch black, the only sound was my own ragged breathing, accompanied by the gut-churning crunch of leaves underfoot, growing closer. Each step was deliberate, heavy, like the entity beyond my sight knew exactly where it was going. I stood frozen, eyes wide, straining to pierce the veil of night. But there was nothing to see, only the sounds drawing nearer. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and an undertone of diesel from the engines. And though it was familiar, it couldn't shake the weight of the moment. I didn't dare move, didn't dare to take my eyes off the darkness. My fingers curled and uncurled, seeking anything to hold on to. But all I had was the cold night air and the unyielding thud of my pulse. The breathing grew louder now, more distinct, mingled with the relentless crunching of leaves. It was so close, just at the edge of where I last saw the creature. My heart was a hammer, my every instinct screaming to run. but my legs wouldn't heed the call. I stood there, helpless, waiting for what approached, camouflaged in the dark.
I reckon it's a cold one tonight. The kind where the chill bites right through your jacket and makes you wish you'd layered up more. The coffee's still hot in my thermos though, and good thing too, 'cause these night shifts ain't getting any warmer. Can't complain too much, I guess, since the railway is like a second home out here in Iron County. Quiet and predictable, just how I like it. So I took another sip of that strong black brew and savored the warmth as it spread through me, warding off the November night air. The trees around me stood solemn and bare, their branches like wiry fingers reaching up towards a stubbornly overcast sky. There wasn't a hint of a breeze, making the forest feel as though it were holding its breath. I trudged alongside the rails, listening to the crunch of gravel underfoot and thinking about how far the sound of a train whistle carries in the stillness out here, echoing through the woods. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of movement. A hulking figure slinked along the edge of the tracks. I paused and squinted through the gloom, figuring it was a stray dog. Been known to happen out in this neck of the woods, where folks let their animals roam a bit. It was massive, though. Bigger than most dogs I'd seen around here. Probably a trick of the lighting, I thought. I kept on walking, scolding myself for letting my imagination get the best of me. But then, that shadow glided with a fluidity that stirred an uneasy feeling in my gut. It didn't make sense, but I brushed it off as the dim lighting playing tricks on my tired eyes. After all, I'd been out here for hours, and fatigue can do funny things to a man's mind. Just ahead, that shadow darted across the tracks with an eerie grace, like a wisp of smoke being pulled along by the wind. My feet faltered. That wasn't any dog. A shiver took hold of me, a chill no thermos could warm away. The creature stepped into the meager light, and its eyes caught the glow, bright and calculating. Sharp teeth gleamed like shards of glass in its maw, and the very earth seemed to groan under its weight as railroad ties creaked in protest. Instinct kicked in, and I tightened my grip around the thermos, holding it like it might be of some comfort or use. I began to edge backward, each step deliberate not to provoke whatever it was that stood before me. I hoped it wouldn't notice, that it might just move along, leaving me none the worse for wear. But loose gravel had other ideas, and my boot twisted awkwardly, sending me sprawling. The thermos flew from my grasp and clanged against the steel rail with a sound that seemed to echo for miles. I lay there for a moment, heart pounding loud enough in my ears that it nearly drowned out everything else. In the stillness that followed, the creature's eyes snapped onto the source of the noise. They glowed more fiercely now, as if ignited by the clamor, and some primal instinct told me to stay as still as the grave. My breath hitched, and the seconds seemed to crumble away, each one slower than the last. As I lay there, the distant whistle of a train carried through the night air, a lonely wail that seemed to answer the tension around me. The creature didn't move, just fixed me with those blazing eyes, and the sound of that whistle lingered in the cold November darkness, wrapping around the both of us as the story came to its unyielding halt. My first encounter with what might be called a dogman happened when my wife and I took our dogs, Lady and Cinnamon, to the James A. Reed National Wildlife Preservation in Missouri. It's in Lee Summit. Lady's an American pit and a sweetheart, except with other dogs. And Cinnamon's a little dachshund. They love to run, so we go there for walks, picnics, or just to let them loose. This day in March 2022, we chose a different part of the park to explore because the place is over 3,000 acres. We preferred areas where there weren't many people around, so we ended up on the quieter side of a bank. As we walked, I noticed an area with some kind of disturbance. What caught my eye was a gigantic wolf print. I compared it to my foot and estimated it was about 6 to 7 inches long,
much bigger than any canine print I'd seen. We wandered over to where a small peninsula jutted into a lake or pond. I couldn't tell which because of its odd size. There, I found a stripped deer carcass, leaving just one hoof with bits of fur. I wondered who or what had brought it there and cleaned it out. Nearby, I discovered a spent shotgun shell, which seemed out of place. Hunting shouldn't have been allowed that close to homes, so it puzzled me. My curiosity made me compare the mysterious paw print with Lady's. Hers was only 1.5 inches or so. I took pictures and later did some research. Even the largest Alaskan wolf print didn't match what I'd found. It felt like a kill zone, different from usual wildlife tracks around water. Not long after, within a week or so, another unsettling event happened. I was on a phone call, pacing around my house, and decided to step out on the deck. It was dusk, not completely dark. There's a park behind my house where kids practice sports. As I looked out, I saw a black figure. What stood out most was its posture and its glowing red eyes. It was about 25 feet from my fence, and I was elevated on my deck. The figure's stance was like a superhero. One hand in front, a leg stretched out, the other knee bent. It reminded me of Spider-Man, but its features were more like Batman, with spiky ears projecting from its head. The eyes were red and seemed to glow. I felt an immediate wave of fear, which is unusual for me. I pretended I hadn't seen it, feeling like it was related to the print I'd seen earlier. It seemed to be surveilling me, assessing me. I turned back to the door, acting as if nothing was there, and went inside. I was scared, and I felt like it was evaluating me. I locked the door and kept up my phone conversation, not wanting it to see me. If I had to guess, if the figure stood up, it'd be about 6.5 feet tall. I'm 6 foot myself, and its athletic build stood out to me. I have experience gauging body types from my background in personal training and natural bodybuilding. This thing was definitely athletic, and those red eyes were unforgettable. Since that encounter, I felt a lingering fear, especially that first night when I had to go to my car. It was late, and everyone was asleep. I'm not usually scared, but seeing that thing had changed something in me. I pretended like it wasn't there, even if deep down I knew it was.
I was up on the ridge last week, and let me tell you, the wind cuts through you like a knife up there. This time of year, the mornings are downright cold, but it sure beats the summertime heat we get in the valley. I swear, sometimes my route takes me further into the middle of nowhere than I thought was possible in Kittitas County. Tonight was no exception. I had my route logs and receipts neatly arranged in the passenger seat of my old Chevy K10, my companion on these late night journeys. I was heading down a back road near an old farmstead, trying to make sense of my scribbled notes under the dim dome light. It was 2:30 in the morning, and the only company I had were the tall, whispering pines lining the road. Every now and then, I open the truck door to the smell of fresh cut hay, and it always reminds me of the county fair. People in Ellensburg drive like they're the only ones on the road, and it makes a fella's job a whole lot tougher. But out here, there wasn't a soul in sight. It was just me and the sound of the rural night, the K10's engine purring like a content cat. As I rounded a bend, a distant silhouette appeared in the road ahead. It was just a shadow, but it moved in a strange way that makes you notice. I squinted through the windshield. Looked like a stray dog at first. I can't stand it when folks let their dogs run loose, 'cause I'm always worried they'll get under the truck tires. You wouldn't believe how many times I've had to chase down a customer for a missing receipt before I finish my shift. But as I got closer, the shape didn't quite match a dog. It seemed bigger, but I chalked it up to the night playing tricks with the headlights bouncing off the trees. This road, slick from the rain, could be as treacherous as a rattlesnake, so I kept my wits about me and my chains handy just in case.
Then it happened. An eerie, unnatural growl rolled through the air like thunder. It wasn't any sound I'd ever heard. It sent a shiver down my spine. I gripped the wheel with a firm hold. It was like the darkness had a voice, low and guttural, that you felt more than heard. My old beast of a rig, she runs as smooth as butter if you know how to treat her right. But even she seemed on edge, rumbling beneath me. With trembling fingers, I reached for the gear shift as the massive creature loomed directly in front of the K-10. Two pale eyes stared through the windshield, blocking the path. My heart thumped against my ribs, the breath catching rough in my throat. Big open fields have always been my soft spot, stretching forever under the wide sky. But the confines of the cab felt too close now. I slapped the transmission into reverse, my foot jamming the gas pedal down. The engine roared, and the truck shuddered backward. But the rear tires spun in the mud, slick and unforgiving. The realization sunk in deep. I was stuck, the truck's tires digging themselves into the muck like a frightened animal's claws. The growl came again, echoing closer, vibrating inside my chest. My breath came in quick puffs, warm mist on the cold window. The creature's outline shifted, still backlit by the high beams, a shadowy figure emerging from the night itself. I glanced at the rearview mirror, the haunting glow of the creature's eyes catching the dim reflection. They remained fixed on me, a shadowy figure in the moving shadows, always present. There was no running, no escape, just those eyes, and the darkness surrounding us, wrapping tight like the November chill.
The sound of the saws was still ringing in my ears as I stepped out of the mill, the night air wrapping around me like a damp shroud. I could feel the sawdust clinging to my clothes, sticking to my skin in stubborn patches. Despite the late hour, my mind was humming with the rhythm of the mill, the conveyor belt's squeal still gnawing at my nerves. That thing was going to be the death of me one day. I pulled up the collar of my jacket, trying to keep the cold from settling in my bones. But the November chill had a way of finding every crevice. The gravel crunched under my boots as I made my way down the logging road. The air was thick with the smell of pine and hickory, cutting through the exhaust and grime. Just about the only sweet thing at this hour. Jack's headset flashed across my mind. He'd left it in the break room again. One day, he'd lose it for good. But that was his problem, not mine. My thoughts drifted toward the diner at the end of the road, and the promise of hot coffee there, indifferent to the fact that folks said it was no good. They didn't understand that at 2:30 a.m., all that mattered was the heat. Just then, I caught a glimpse of a shadowy figure cutting between the trees. I paused for a moment, peering into the gloom. Probably just a stray dog, I figured. There were always a few that wandered near the mill, scavenging where they could. As I continued on, I could sense the figure moving in parallel with my path, keeping pace in a way that was faster than any dog should. My fingers tightened on the strap of my bag, but I shrugged it off, trying to focus on the diner's lights ahead. A low growl rippled through the air, winding its way through the trees to reach me. It was a growl that didn't fit any dog I'd ever heard, and the hair on my arms stood on end. My feet faltered, and I glanced back, every muscle pulling tight. Hurrying my steps, the diner's neon sign flickered into view, casting a pool of light that felt like safety. But just as I reached the edge of the lot, the creature stepped into the light, its eyes catching the street lamp's glow in a way that stopped me cold. They reflected with an unsettling clarity, far closer than expected. With shaking hands, I fumbled for my cell phone,
the buttons slippery under my fingers. I managed to get it out, but as my thumb hovered over the contact list, the screen flickered and died, leaving me in the dim light with nothing but the distant hum of saws behind me. Breath ragged in the chill night air, I found myself standing there, isolated, feeling the November damp seep deeper under my skin. The creature watched, its silhouette unmoving, save for those eyes that seemed to pierce the shadows between us. I didn't dare move, standing transfixed as the cold kept finding me. In that moment, I caught the faintest sound of the conveyor belt back at the mill, its rusty squeal a strange comfort, a tether to the ordinary world I had just stepped out of. But here, on the logging road, all of that might as well have been a lifetime away. The creature's eyes remained fixed on mine, a glint of something wild and unknowable. There was no sound now, save for the faint echo of the saws, relentless in their work, cutting through the night like a persistent whisper laced with a warning. The road's slick, truth be told, with the rain from last night still hanging on those stubborn leaves, making each turn a challenge. Midnight came and went, and I was hours into the drive, trying to keep my eyes and mind from drifting off into thoughts of home and Ma's turkey. Thanksgiving's just around the corner, and I reckon it's been far too long since I had a proper family meal, table full and laughter echoing. These loose county roads, all mud and potholes, they're full of character, but you gotta keep your wits about you navigating them. My old Peterbilt 379, she hums a steady tune beneath me, a comfort like the lull of a familiar melody when the radio's not cutting out on my Hank Williams tunes. Smells of wet pine mix with the perpetual diesel aroma, strange as it sounds. It's a sort of perfume for a night driver like me. Ain't no soul in sight at this hour, headlights punching holes in the dark, but that's the way I like it. Loose County falls silent once you leave the main roads, out here in the back of Beyond. I scan the shoulder out of habit, and there it is. Another truck stopped to the side. Probably another driver resting a spell. Us drivers, we find camaraderie in shared challenges, don't need to see a face to know a kindred spirit. As my wheels crunch closer, something about that truck catches my eye. It ain't parked. It looks older, rusted like it's seen a few decades without a good fix-up. Odd. Ain't no driver near it neither, standing like a ghost left to rot. I ease up on the gas, looking around, wondering if the fella's taking a leak in the trees or some such. Then, it hits me. This scraping sound, metal on metal, or nails on a chalkboard echoing from the direction of that hunk of rust. It's not the wind, nor any critter I know. I grip the wheel tighter, every muscle tense. You don't expect company on this kind of road, not at 2:30 in the dead of night. It's like the world stops, me and that noise, crawling up my spine. My headlights catch movement. Something steps out onto the road. It's one of those tall forms you hear about but never see. Limbs stretched out too far, eyes reflecting the light with an unsettling glow. My breath catches in my throat, constricts near choking. I slam my foot down on the pedal, the Peterbilt lurching forward with a roar. My hand fumbles for the radio, trying to make connection, but my words are out before static swallows them. The figure's form stretches and shifts, larger now, closing in through the rear view like a specter that defies the very laws of nature. Damn radio goes silent, leaving a low growl humming through the speakers, like the night itself finding voice. Heart pounding, I force myself to focus on the road ahead, trees rushing past in a blur. I don't look back, but the image keeps burning in my mind, those eyes, glowing against the black, trailing me. It's a sight that sticks, regardless of how far I drive or how fast. Down that endless road, engine roaring and my heart with it, the memory of the creature lingers, eyes in the mirror, a constant reminder of the night the dark decided to show its face.
I tell ya, working nights at the lumber mill ain't for the faint-hearted, especially in late October, when the cold bites right through your jacket. The smell of freshly cut pine gets stuck in your nose and clothes,
but it's the kind of nice smell, I reckon. Better than diesel fumes. Every night, I drove my old '89 Chevy Silverado up that gravel road, dodging potholes and branches, mostly with Hank Williams' voice crackling through the truck's radio. It was a good thing the mill was remote, 'cause that meant less folks around to bug ya, but it could get a tad lonely too. Sometimes, I'd find myself humming along to the old tunes. Those songs reminded me of simpler times, before all this tech stuff took over. I swear, if I had to fix that busted saw machine one more time, I'd lose it. It was like dealing with a stubborn mule. This particular night, as I hauled another load of lumber down the echoing mill, I was distracted by an old Hank Williams tune playing faintly through the radio. I was lost in the music, letting it take me back, when movement caught my eye up ahead on the gravel road. A shadowy figure darted across, and I chuckled, thinking it was that stray dog I've seen sometimes from the neighboring property, always sniffing around. But then, the way it moved struck me odd. It had a gait unlike any dog I'd ever seen before, legs bending and shifting in ways that weren't quite right. Still, I shrugged it off, figured it was shadows playing tricks with my eyes, and continued my route. The night was clear, the moon a silver coin sitting high, lighting up the woods in a way that ain't a bad sight at all. I was about to reach the mill when, under that moonlight, I caught a clearer glimpse of it. This was no familiar creature. It stood upright on two legs, taller than it had any right to be. I stumbled back, boots scuffing against the gravel as it stepped closer. Its eyes caught the moon and threw it back at me. My hands went clammy. I couldn't pull a full breath. I scrambled back toward my truck, tripping over my feet, fumbling for the door handle. I yanked it open and reached for the radio, cranking up the volume, hoping the old Hank Williams tune would scare it off. The sound filled the truck, spilling out into the night. But instead of reassurance, the music warped and crackled, caught in a loop. The creature didn't move, just stood there, eyes on me through the windshield. Hank's voice kept looping, distorted, lower each time. The creature never blinked. That's the last clear thing I remember. That warped sound and those eyes, and the two of them together feeling like the same thing.
I remember driving through the winding roads deep within Michigan's Manistee National Forest. It was dusk, and the fading light cast eerie shadows on the towering pines lining the narrow road. I was just a trucker passing through, used to the solitude of these routes, having done them many times. But that night, something felt off. As I turned a corner, my headlights briefly illuminated a pair of reflective eyes in the dense underbrush. At first, I thought it might be a deer, but something about the height, those eyes seemed too far from the ground. My heart sped up, pounding loud enough I could hear it over the rumbling engine. I crept on, eyes darting to the mirrors, half expecting those eyes to reappear. I came to a sudden stop when I saw it again, this time stepping onto the road. A creature stood there, upright, easily over 7 feet tall, with a muscular build that was unmistakably canine yet disturbingly human. Its eyes glowed amber red in the headlights, and I could see its teeth as it seemed to sneer. Every instinct told me to run, but I recalled hearing that fleeing would likely provoke a chase. Instead, I kept my eyes down, still watching, and reached for my .357 Magnum, feeling the cold metal against my palm a strange comfort. I debated taking a shot, but the thing just stood there, as if assessing me. I slowly backed my truck up, careful not to make sudden movements. The creature tracked me but didn't advance. My breaths were slow and deep, though I could feel my hands shaking. I tried to create distance, keeping my eyes averted to avoid direct contact.
I heard a low growl that made my skin crawl, but it remained on the road, watching me back away until my truck was safely distant. Finally, I managed to turn and drove away, my heart still racing as I left the forest behind.
Well, it was one of those nights that just seemed to stretch out forever. And I had a double load to haul since Jim decided to call in sick. Again. I was maneuvering that Kenworth W900 through the gnarly logging access road. Nothing but rough terrain and twists deep in the woods. You get used to those bumps after a while, though they shake you to your bones. The air in early September up here kissed my skin with a cold bite, but it was as clear-headed as a cup of strong coffee. Moosehead Lake loomed on my left, a silent companion under the dim starlight, vast and peaceful, reminding me there was something bigger out there than my rumbling truck. The engine hummed its low song, and the scent of pine seemed to seep into my very bones, like wearing the forest itself. At this ungodly hour of 3 a.m, solitude hung heavy, interrupted only by the occasional screech of brakes. With this kind of weight on board, you had to be all kinds of careful. My breath formed little clouds, visible even in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. It was just me, my thoughts, and the road stretching endlessly onward. Not for the first time, I was on the lookout for stray dogs. I'd seen plenty from nearby farms, but that night, one silhouette caught my eye. Just a large shadow off to the side. I first dismissed it as one of those farm dogs that's wandered too far. Didn't think too much of it, honestly. But then, as time dragged on and the miles ticked by, I noticed something off in the rearview mirror. That big old shadow was still there, trailing as if it were fixated on the truck. Now, I considered it might just be the reflection playing tricks, but no, it stayed there a good while, longer than any curious animal would. Then, a piercing fear cut through the layers of flannel and denim. The eyes on that thing. They caught a little moonlight and shone back at me like a couple of headlights. No animal I'd ever seen had eyes like that, glowing something fierce in the pitch black. I couldn't tear my gaze away, stiff fingers wrapped tight around the steering wheel. I think I might have slowed a bit, 'cause next thing I knew, the creature was right there in front of the Kenworth. It wasn't like any four-legged creature. The muscles were all wrong, and it moved with an unsettling, strange gait. It was too close for my liking, too close by half. Well, I did what any sane truck driver would do. I slammed my foot down on the gas, hoping the sheer power of the truck and the momentum of that double load would just barrel through. The engine roared like a beast, and I gripped that wheel, knuckles white and aching. The truck swayed and shuddered under the weight. A dangerous lurch, as though one wrong move might send us tipping over, load and all. But just like that, it vanished, slipping out of sight without a trace or sound. I couldn't even say for sure where it went. But the road stretched on, dark and silent as before. Moosehead Lake a steady presence on the one side, the forest on the other. But those eyes, they stayed with me, burned into my mind's eye, and I had a feeling I'd be seeing them long after I parked that truck. Just me, the night, and the quiet road ahead. Every morning, way before sunrise, I'm out in the barn with the cows, getting ready to milk them by 4 a.m. sharp. It's cold as heck this time of year, especially being out here in central upstate New York, near Oneida County. The wind bit through my coat as I crunched across the frostbitten grass, heading for the barn. The old wood creaked in greeting as I pushed the door open, the scent of hay and animals wrapping around me like an old friend. It's one of those familiar smells, all hay and old wood mixed with the scent of the cows. Grabbing my gear, I was half listening to the quiet murmurs of the cows stirring awake when I noticed a thin figure near the back pasture. It looked like a stray, emaciated dog, visible in the dim pre-dawn light. The outline of its ribs was sharp against its skin, and it had a ragged look to it that tugged at me. Strays didn't often make it out here, but lately the woods seemed to be pushing all sorts of critters our way. As I watched, the dog moved, limping across the frosted ground. Its steps seemed uncertain, each stride a struggle against the earth's pull, as if it wasn't sure how its legs worked. I paused, leaning against the worn wood of the barn, my breath clouding in the cold air. Then the creature turned its head, and in the soft glow of the moon, its eyes caught the light in a way that wasn't quite right. They shone too bright, large and reflective, like twin mirrors catching the moonbeams. My heart gave a jolt, a sharp pang of instinctual fear. I hesitated, taking a step closer. The matted fur clung to its two long limbs, and as I squinted, trying to make sense of the shapes in the shadow, I realized with a shiver that it was no dog. My hands clenched around the handle of the barn door, the cold metal biting into my palm. I backed away, careful with each step, the frozen ground crunching under my boots like breaking glass. My breath came in quick bursts, fogging up as I edged toward the barn door. Safety was just a few steps away, and I needed it like I hadn't needed anything in a good long while. Just as my fingers closed around the door handle, a low, guttural sound rolled across the pasture. It was the kind of noise that vibrates under the skin and settles at the base of your spine, leaving you frozen in place. The breath I was holding slipped away in a shudder. For a moment, silence reigned, the stillness of the early morning shattered only by that eerie echo. My boots were rooted to the ground, body refusing to listen to the brain's insistence to move, to flee. Then, as if the darkness itself swallowed it whole, the creature slipped away, disappearing into the shadows of the pasture. All that lingered was its unsettling cry, a haunting note that hung in the air long after the thing had vanished. My hand finally moved, wrenching the barn door open, but the quiet felt different now, as if it carried a hidden weight I couldn't quite shake. Every morning before venturing up the mountain, I'd make a point to swing by Sally's diner. The ritual was simple but sacred to me. A steaming cup of coffee with that delightful nutty aroma, and a slice of Sally's apple pie, its crust flaky and perfect. Couldn't imagine starting my day without that combo sitting on the passenger seat of my trusty old Ford F-150. As I jostled along the gravel access road, the chill in the Ozarks nipped at the edges of the truck's warmth. The road, a near-ancient trail of bumps and pits, snaked its way up through the hills predictably as ever. Somewhere around the bend, my headlights caught the darting shadow of something across the path. Instinct had me swerving, the tires kicking up stones in protest. Perhaps a stray hunting dog, I reckoned, a common enough sight around these parts. But as the shape melted into the woods, a low howl came after, rolling across the treetops and settling. It was a sound that had my hand tightening on the steering wheel just a touch more than usual. Despite a knot forming in my stomach, I shook it off. Work wouldn't wait. The tower stood sentinel against the early morning sky, and as I arrived, that same eerie howl rose again, threading through the rustling leaves. It wasn't a dog. I knew that much now. My breath hitched, clouding the cold air in puffs as I stepped out, the familiar hum of the equipment faintly reaching my ears over the sounds still lingering in the air. The climb was routine, but today my eyes kept drifting to the line of trees. About halfway up, the world around me stilled, save for the rustle of leaves caught in the wind. Down below, by the edge of the woods, a pair of eyes gleamed, catching the pale light in a way that stopped me cold. They watched, unblinking, as if measuring the distance between us. With a shaky hand, I fumbled for the radio clipped to my belt, hoping to send out a signal for help. Static crackled, mocking my need for contact.
The familiar voice on the other end never came, leaving only the silence to hang heavy around me. Then came the distinct, ominous snap of a branch, closer than I would have liked. The sound reverberated through me, twisting my stomach into a knot tighter than any bolt I'd ever turned. I glanced down, the beam of light from my headlamp barely piercing the darkness, but enough to see the glint of eyes had moved closer than before. Halfway up that tower, my heart pounded against the quiet. From below, a low growl began, working its way up through the dark. And there, in the dark, those eyes held me, a haunting beacon in the wilderness of the Ozark night. Every night round this time, I take a break from the grain elevator and toss some kibble to the outdoor cats. Keeps them regular and keeps the mice away. Tonight was no different, or so I thought, as I stepped out into the crisp November air. The Palouse can get real chilly in November, and that cold air has a way of finding the cracks in this old loading bay. I wrapped my coat tighter around me, my breath puffing in little clouds that floated away under the dim light. With the kibble scooped in one hand, I made my way across the gravel lot towards the feed bags stacked by the barn. Got these hands that feel all rough and calloused from handling grain sacks all day long. Never quite managed to get them smooth again. The scent of wheat dust clung to me like an old friend, lingering in my clothes and hair as I crouched to pour out the kibble. A rustling noise caught my ear, somewhere near the feed bags, and I paused. Probably just a stray dog from the neighboring farm. We get some stray dogs wandering over from time to time, but they usually don't make a fuss. I shrugged it off and continued with the task at hand, the sound of the rustling fading into the background as I scattered the rest of the kibble for the cats. But the noise picked up again, more intense this time, frantic and rattling, like something bigger than your average dog. The machinery in here didn't startle me as much as this did. It was enough to wake the dead, but I tried to ignore it, dismissing it all the while as just a particularly restless stray. After all, it was late, and my mind had a way of playing tricks on me in the quiet of the night. Then came a low growl, resonating through the darkness, the kind that crawled under my skin, deep and throaty, in a way that no dog I've ever encountered could muster. My hands went still, the roughness of my palms more noticeable, as I realized that whatever was out there wasn't your garden variety stray. The smell of wheat dust was no match for the adrenaline starting to rip through me. I edged closer, drawn by a mix of curiosity and a gnawing sense of something not quite right. A large silhouette loomed by the loading bay, eyes reflecting the moonlight in a way that made them almost look like twin lanterns. My heart thudded in my chest, and the weight of apprehension settled over me, with cold seeping into my bones as the November air wrapped around me. Retreat seemed the safest bet, back to the grain elevator where I could make a call for help. But as I began to turn, muscles stiff and reluctant, the chilling sound of heavy breathing surrounded me. Whatever it was had closed the distance far quicker than I cared to admit, the sound wrapping around me like the wind whistling through the barn walls, an eerie sort of song that set my pulse racing. The wind picked up sharply, gusting through the gaps and masking any sound the creature might make. It was just me, the rising wind, and indistinct forms lurking beyond the reach of the light. Nothing more, nothing less. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, caught between the safety of retreat and the pressing weight of the unknown. In these November nights, you never quite shake the smell of wheat dust, nor the feeling of being watched under a wide, open sky. Every night, I made sure my flashlight had fresh batteries before I headed out for my rounds. There's something reassuring about a solid beam piercing the murky dark of the pine barrens. The place got real quiet most nights, but the wind rustled the leaves, especially since it was late October. My breath hovered in the cool night air as I walked through the abandoned industrial park. Folks thought it was eerie, but to me, it was just another dead spot in Jersey. The generators hummed in the background, a soothing, familiar noise, even if they smelled like diesel. I didn't care much for the busted-out windows on the old factory. They let in too much cold air, but I found a spot where the wind didn't bite as much. Midnight was my favorite time, because that's when I sat down with my turkey sandwich and a thermos of strong, black coffee. As the clock struck 12, I took my first bite, savoring the routine as much as the meal itself. My boots crunched on the gravel, especially with fallen pine needles scattered about. After finishing my break, I continued my rounds, my flashlight illuminating the path ahead. It was quiet, just how I liked it, ever since the junkies moved on. Then I noticed a shape move out by the far chain link fence. Maybe it was a large dog or something like that. There'd been rumors of them, wandering through the barrens. Sometimes I heard a distant howl, but it was never more than that. I shrugged it off and continued, the beams from my flashlight sure. But then I heard it. A deep growl, like a low rumble from the depths of somewhere I couldn't place. I felt uneasy, but kept moving. It was only a dog, I told myself, or maybe some other animal, confused and lost. The wind picked up, sending a scattering of leaves across the park. Then it all went silent. A high-pitched scream darted through the night, stopping me in my tracks. Nothing about it was right. It echoed through the park, bouncing off the rusted steel and concrete walls. I turned towards the sound, pulse racing, and that's when I saw it. In the doorway of the old factory stood a large figure with eyes glowing in the darkness. The flashlight beam faltered as my hands started shaking. I reached for my radio, pressing the button for backup. Static. Just static. That's the worst part about this job. The radio's always cut out around here. I kept trying, squeezing the transmitter, but all I got was more crackling white noise. The creature hadn't moved. Its eyes were still fixed on me. Then it inched closer, and in the dim light, I saw limbs covered in sharp claws emerging from the shadows. I felt a chill, and my breath came in sharp, shallow bursts. There was an unnatural quiet covering the park now. No rustling leaves, no hum of the generators. Just silence, broken by the crunch of gravel underfoot as I took a slow step back, my flashlight beam flickering in my unsteady grip. I stood there, unable to move, as the gravel crunched one last time.
Back in August of 1983, I was living just outside of Pitchen, Ohio. It was around 9:30, maybe creeping up on 10 at night, and it was dark. My car was parked down by the barn, and we had a nightlight between the barn and the house. I lived in a farmhouse, and when I stepped out, I turned around the hut shrubs and kept walking. Then I almost walked right into this creature. It was all black, and the smell was just ungodly. If the light hadn't been on, I would have walked straight into it. All I could see were its black eyes squinting at me. It was down in a crouched position, and I was only 2.5, maybe 3 feet from it. I was terrified. The creature had pointed ears, a fat snout, not long ones, and long hair on its head and shoulders that continued down the middle of its back. The rest of the hair was short. Its tail was half a tail, but wide. The legs were like a dog's, but it had human arms and shoulders. The claws were black, and I thought I was going to die. I started backing up, asking God to get me out of this situation. As I backed away, my feet hit the concrete, but I kept my eye on it. Then it grinned at me,
and that grin took my fear to another level. I managed to get back into the house, trying to move a gas stove in front of the door, but you can't really move those things. My parents heard the commotion and jumped up. When I couldn't move the stove, I grabbed a kitchen chair and wedged it under the handle. My dad reached for his weapon, a .22 Ruger, but I stopped him, saying, "That ain't gonna do nothing." He asked what I saw, and I blurted out, "A hyena, a wolverine, a werewolf. It's a werewolf, Dad." He insisted werewolves weren't real, and I challenged him to go out and tell it that himself. We dropped it, and whatever I had planned for that night, I no longer wanted to go. I stayed home. The next night, my uncle and aunt came over to play cards with my mom and dad. I went upstairs to watch TV in my room, and suddenly, the smell hit me again. It was back, and I heard something climbing the tree outside my window. Dogs don't climb trees, but I could hear claws digging into the bark. I grabbed my shotgun and some slugs, ran downstairs, expecting to catch my dad and uncle still at the kitchen table. But they were already outside, weapons in hand, because of what happened the night before. As I ran out the kitchen door, they rushed back in, pushing me inside, saying, "You're not going outside." I asked if they had seen it, and they confirmed. My dad called game warden Morton O'Hold Blackwood, and he came out Sunday morning. He saw where it climbed the tree, where it jumped from the tree into the cornfield about 35 to 40 yards, knocking down corn stalks. There were prints, dog prints, around 3 or 4 inches deep in the dirt where it landed. He saw where it turned right and ran down the cornfield. Blackwood covered up the tracks, came back, and told us we didn't see anything. He warned us to drop it, or they'd make our lives miserable.
I just pulled over at this rest stop on 287, and it's a quiet night. Just the hum of engines and that cold Texas wind biting a little more than usual. I cracked open the door of my Kenworth W900, stretching my legs on the gravel-strewn lot. The distinct smell of diesel lingered in the air as I poured myself a cup from my thermos. The coffee from that little diner in Amarillo, still warm enough to keep me going through the night. The wife's expecting my call around this time, so I'll sit a spell and dial her up before hitting the road again. I settle back against the side of my truck, the familiar feel of the metal cold against my back. I pulled out my phone, ready to hear her voice, when I noticed a shape moving near the trash bins. Just some movement in the dark, so I figured it was another stray critter getting into the trash bins out here. Part of the territory, I reckon. But there was an unnerving aspect to it. The shadow that flickered under the dim rest stop lights looked larger than any dog should be. I squinted, trying to make sense of it, as the trash cans began to clatter more loud than expected. My grip on the thermos tightened, the steam from the cup mingling with the cold air around me. I heard it then. An eerie growl, unlike any canine sound I've ever come across. Not a strayin' mutt, that was for sure. Prickles of fear raced up my neck, my boots rooted to the gravel beneath. My gut twisted with alarm, and the familiar sound of gravel under my boots felt unnervingly foreign. As I took a step closer, my breath hitchin' in the sharp air, I saw them. Those eyes glowing brighter than the moonlight that bathed the rest area. The silhouette moved, taller than anticipated, with its breath visible in the cold night. It was a creature unfamiliar and unsettling, standing there, watching me back. Cold apprehension tightened my insides, the air seeming to press in closer, and I knew I had to reach my truck, quick-like. I turned, my boots crunching on the gravel, reaching for my phone to call for help. But my hands were numb and unsteady. The phone slipped from my grip, hitting the ground with a dull thud. I fumbled to pick it up, cursing under my breath, as a deep, unsettling silence wrapped around the rest area, cutting me off from the world beyond the reach of the dim lights.
Everything seemed to fall painfully still. The only sound my breathing, ragged and loud in my ears. Then it came again, the crunching of gravel. Only this time, it wasn't under my boots. I stood frozen, my heart thumping in my chest, as an unseen presence moved, circling the lot under the pale moonlight. The quiet night suddenly felt vast and empty, and I realized just how alone I was out there on 287, with that cold Texas wind biting a little more than usual.
Driving down that stretch of Route 234 at 2 a.m., I held my trusty Steelers thermos close. It was filled up with that black gold coffee that keeps me going on these night shifts. The engine of my old Ford F-150 was the only sound slicing through the stillness. This road to the plant has always been a quiet one, just the way I like it at this hour, with the faint hum of the tires keeping me company. I passed by the cornfield, getting browner by the day, looking like some unkempt, scraggly beard against the night sky. Even though I practically grew up around these parts, its transformation each season never fails to catch my eye. Funny how nothing really changes much in Adams County, but the cornfields, they sure have their cycle. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of a shadowy shape near the edge where the field meets the road. It was real close to the fence line. First thought that popped into my head? Probably just a stray farm dog, wandering about, looking for something. Happens sometimes around here. As the truck moved closer, I noticed something unusual about the shape. It wasn't moving like any dog I'd seen. The chill in the air seeped into the cab past the cracked vent window. I checked the side mirror, hoping to catch another look as I moved along. But then, right as I was almost upon it, the figure suddenly stood upright. Just like that. Right there on the road, watching me. I could feel my grip on the steering wheel tighten, and I glanced at the rearview mirror, trying to comprehend what I'd seen. The headlights caught its shadow, but there was no mistaking its shape now. It wasn't any dog I'd ever seen. I pulled up to the plant's gravel lot and stopped. The engine's rumble came to a halt, leaving silence that seemed heavier than before. I climbed out of the truck, and there it was, the figure stepping closer, eyes reflecting in the headlights. They seemed to shine back at me, sharper and more unnatural than any pair of eyes I'd ever encountered. I felt around in my flannel jacket, my fingers brushing against the cold steel of my thermos, then dropped my phone in panic. The device slipped, hitting the pavement with a sickening crack, screen shattering into a spider web of dead pixels. The air was still as I stood there, phone half buried in gravel, utterly useless. I looked up, holding my breath, and I saw it. Those eyes. Caught by the moonlight, they gleamed through the darkness, unmoving, unwavering. That moment hung there in the air, all alone with that figure, and those piercing eyes that seemed to take in everything, yet give nothing away. It's 4 a.m, and I was rolling down Route 27, trying to keep my Ford F-150 steady on the gravel road. Those bumps jar your teeth fierce. November's biting cold out here in the driftless, but my truck's heater wasn't working proper, so I was bundled up in my flannels and thermals. I had a job waiting for me at the Larson farm. One of their combines done broke down in the middle of harvest, and they needed it fixed for first light. Early starts never bothered me much, but I did wish folks would take better care of their equipment. Ain't no magic to it. Diesel and engine grease clung to my clothes from yesterday's work, and as I drove, I let the quiet of the road settle in. The wind whistled through the bare corn stalks, and it was peaceful enough without the sun up. Kinda nice.
if you ignored the cold seeping into your bones. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shape moving in the fields. Looked like a cow wandering off from its pasture. Couldn't blame it, with fences going unfixed these days. But it was none of my business unless someone asked for help. As I peered, it struck me that the silhouette looked too large, too awkward in the early morning shadows. But I shook it off, reckoning it was a trick of the poor light playing on my mind. I kept my eyes on the road, hoping the sunrise would be enough to clear out any tricks playing on me. Then, a low, guttural noise rolled out from the dark, deep enough to vibrate through the truck. It weren't no cow's moo, and that set my gut churning. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was the wind playing games, but my hands gripped the wheel tighter. The creature walked onto the road. Not a cow, not by any stretch, with eyes catching my headlights, reflecting back an unnatural glow. I couldn't move, just stared as it huffed, breathing steam into the cold air. My having slowed, unease crept into me. I reached for my phone to call for help, thumb slipping over the screen. Dropped it. It clattered onto the floorboard. Scrambling to pick it up, I leaned down, and the engine stalled there, leaving me in silence. Eerie quiet, but for that creature's heavy breath fogging the windshield. I froze, mind racing with what to do next. The truck felt like a tin can, not near enough between me and whatever stood out there. Heart beating like a hammer, I tried the ignition again, but the engine just turned over with no luck. Cold air crept in through the cracks and crevices, mixing with the stale breath inside the cab. I shifted in the seat, eyes glued to the figure outside. Then, a fog rolled in, dense and thick, like it came from nowhere at all, curling over the road. It swallowed the creature, slow, leaving me with the sound of wind whistling through those bare fields.
I usually started my run about 11 p.m., right after I'd filled my old thermos with the strongest brew I could make. The night stretched ahead of me, just a long ribbon of asphalt, winding between darkened fields. Night driving ain't too bad once you get used to the quiet, and the cold gusts sneaking in through the cracked window. Cass County roads can get lonely this time of night, but that's fine by me. Less traffic means less hassle. I took a swig of coffee, feeling the warmth spread through me as I navigated my Peterbilt 579 down Route 7. The dim glow of my headlights skimmed over the familiar countryside, punctuated by the occasional silhouette of a barn or a rusted grain silo. These farm folks sure like their big dogs. You see them wandering all over, looking like they own the place. Spotting one such large form ambling across the road, I eased off the accelerator. At first glance, it seemed like one of those stray dogs from the nearby farms, its coat blending in with the shadows. I flicked my headlights, expecting it to scurry off into the brush like usual. But there it stood, pausing right in the middle of my lane, staring into the beams with an unusual intensity. Potholes were the bane of my existence, but the way this creature held its ground was unnerving. Those eyes, they didn't just reflect light, they caught it and held it, an otherworldly glow that seemed to pulse with each beat of my heart. A low, resonant growl reached my ears, rumbling through the cab of the truck, vibrating the thermos on the dashboard. As the truck rolled nearer, I could discern the figure with more detail. It was more man than beast. The shift in its silhouette sent a jolt through me, hands tightening on the steering wheel. I saw shoulders that were too broad, legs that stood firm like pillars. The smell of diesel stuck to my clothes and skin, a familiar comfort, but it did little to anchor me in the face of this sight. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching against the asphalt, and fumbled for the radio. Fingers danced over the dials, knocking it out of its cradle as I tried to get a hold of anyone on the other end. Come on, I muttered, urging the static to clear. But all I got was a burst of white noise, sharper than the cold cutting through my open window. The creature moved closer, its eyes unwavering,
sharp claws leaving scratch marks across the truck's door as it passed. Metal screeched under its touch, a grating sound that seemed to echo in the stillness around. My breath caught, condensing in the frigid air as I watched through the side mirror, the hairs on my arms prickling upright. The truck's engine hummed on, a steady, grounding presence that vibrated the cab like a heartbeat. There was a rhythm there, in the ticking of the cooling engine and the thrumming in my ears. I dared a glance into the side mirror again, heart in my throat, where those eyes, glowing and unyielding, still reflected back at me. And there it stopped, frozen in that captured moment, the night still, the world asleep, leaving me there on Route 7. Just me, the road, and the steady beat of the wheels.
Every morning, I head to the diner for a nice, hot cup of coffee before I get started. Can't fix nothing without it. This one particular morning, the clock ticked to a precise 3 a.m. by the time I parked my old Ford F-150 outside the diner. The air was biting cold, a reminder November had fully settled in. The folks inside knew me well enough to have my order ready. A to-go cup, steaming and potent enough to rouse even a stubborn mule. Once I had my lifeline in one hand and keys in the other, I made my way over to the barn, perched at the edge of a soybean field. That barn's seen better years, but she holds together fine, especially when it's you and the tractors in need of a little TLC. The road out there ain't much but a dirt path peppered with gravel. And that early morning quiet feels like it's just you and the world barely waking up. As I approached, the crunch of gravel under my boots mixed with another sound. A rustling coming from the heap of rusted metal and spare parts I kept out back. Folks always say I should clean it up, but you never know when you might need an old carburetor or a bit of scrap metal. I figured it was a stray dog rooting through things, looking for scraps or a soft spot to rest. The noise from the junk pile wasn't peculiar at first, a few clinks and the shuffle of paws, but it shifted into a series of unsettling scrapes and low growls that seemed to echo. I held my coffee tighter, a little half-hearted laugh escaping me. Must have been one riled-up dog, probably aggravated by something lurking in the shadows. Just as I was about to brush it off, a piercing howl rose from somewhere inside the barn, reverberating through the chilly air like a gust of wind that sent a chill down my spine. The hair on the nape of my neck prickled as I realized that noise didn't belong to any dog I've ever known. I forced myself to step closer, curiosity or some stubborn streak guiding my boots over the frosty ground toward the barn door. For a moment, all was quiet, just the gentle hum of distant crickets and the rustle of the breeze through the dying soybean stalks. But then I saw it, a large, indistinct creature skulking amid the farm equipment, its eyes catching the dim glow from the lantern I'd left lit. The reflective, steady gaze of those eyes was enough to make my heart pound in my chest. I reached a hand into my pocket, fumbling with my phone. Call someone. Get a bit of light. Anything to dispel this eerie feeling creeping over me. But my hands didn't cooperate. Fingers just a mess of nerves. And before I knew it, my phone slipped free, bouncing off the barn's wooden planks with a clatter that seemed to crack the silence wide open. The creature shifted, releasing a low, rumbling growl that caused a tremor in my resolve. I stood there, rooted in place, with nothing but that narrow beam of moonlight spilling through the barn's rafters and the creature's unblinking eyes fixed on me. The world outside the barn seemed to fade, leaving only us and the night, heavy and still. I was 12 back then, and it happened on our family's property in Union County. My grandpa Jumper, who was a real outdoorsman, asked me to check on the barn one night. There had been a lot of commotion with the horses, so he told me to take one of the dogs and see what was going on. When I got to the barn and opened the door, our 2 horses suddenly bolted out, almost knocking me over in their rush. Once inside, I saw the mule laying down, as if something was pulling it out of its stall. There was this massive, dog-like creature eating it. I was beyond angry and shocked. I remember grabbing Daddy's splitting maul that was nearby and screaming at the creature. That's when it did the unthinkable. It stood up on 2 legs. The fear hit me hard. I turned and ran back to the house, screaming all the way. Grandpa came out with his gun as the dog started barking and charged after the creature. It quickly fled into the trees, heading down the hill behind our house. Things changed dramatically after that. My brother Horace and I were never allowed outside alone near dark again. We always had to be together and take the dogs with us. It made us all feel uneasy. Over the years, while fishing by the ponds, we saw it several more times. It would just stand there, watching us from the trees. Sometimes the dogs wouldn't even notice it, which made it even more unsettling. Then, after a while, it just disappeared. Thankfully, it was gone. But for those years, from when I was 12 to 15, it was like a constant shadow hanging over our lives. Grandpa Jumper told us to never talk about it again, and I didn't speak of it for 63 years, until now.
I clocked in around midnight, the cold iron gates of the abandoned paper mill looming in the dim light. My thermos of coffee in hand was a ritual now, a necessity to keep the chill and drowsiness at bay. By 2 a.m., I was usually halfway through it, sipping to savor the warmth that crept into my limbs. The air in the Upper Peninsula had a particular bite, even inside the mill. It was the kind of chill that gnawed on your bones and refused to let go. The wind outside sometimes found its way through the broken windows, howling like some disembodied specter wandering the derelict halls. It was November, after all, and the weather scarcely let you forget it. I had just made my rounds, muttering under my breath about the trash people littered around, as if it wasn't my job to deal with their mess. My flashlight beam sliced through the thick air, stirring up dust that sparkled like stars before settling back on the ground. The mill's scent, damp wood, and the ghost of paper long since yellowed clung to my jacket, even when I wasn't there. Keeping an eye on the dumpster was another habit I'd adopted. Raccoons sometimes ventured for a late-night snack, leaving a trail of debris in their wake, which was another task for me to handle. This time, though, something else caught my attention. A rustling noise, louder and more distinct than the small critters I was used to chasing off. It could be a vagrant, I thought, seeking shelter from the relentless cold. Folks sometimes wandered in, though it wasn't a regular occurrence. But as I neared, the sound grew louder and more erratic, like someone or something much larger was rifling through the metal confines. Nerves on edge, I edged closer, flashlight swinging toward the noise. That's when I saw it. Eyes in the dark, catching my beam and holding it. I stopped dead. It turned toward me slowly, then stood up out of the dumpster to full height. I'm 6'2", and it cleared me by a foot at least. I couldn't breathe. My hand found the radio on my belt without me telling it to, but I didn't dare look away. In a rush, I tried to call for help, but my own fear swallowed my voice. My fingers, numbed by terror and cold, slipped, and the flashlight tumbled to the ground. It hit the concrete with a hollow clatter, its beam extinguished in the fall, leaving me in a darkness thicker than before.
In that blackness, something brushed my shoulder. I lurched sideways, hit the wall, kept moving. Behind me, a low growl rolled through the building. Not from where the dumpster was, from somewhere deeper in. I didn't stop. I found the exit door by feel, and I didn't look back once.
I was 20 and living near a small town in Wayne County, West Virginia, called Lavalette. My family had moved from Jacksonville, Florida, to escape the humidity and hurricanes. This story begins on a Saturday evening, August 27th, 2017, between 6:30 and 7:30 p.m. I was driving home after a long drive, passing through various towns until I finally found my way back via 8th Street near Lavalette, which led to Mount Union Road. As I approached a blind curve next to an abandoned white church, I slowed down. There was a ledge with fallen trees on one side, and a steep hillside with a path through thick underbrush on the other. That's when it happened. As I rounded the corner, a creature stepped onto the road, on all fours. At first, I thought it was a huge black bear, but as my headlights illuminated it, I realized it resembled a wolf with a long, bushy tail, pointed ears, and a canine-like snout. This wasn't just any wolf. It was as large as a wolf shouldn't be, and had an intelligent glint in its glowing amber eyes. I was both fascinated and unsettled. There weren't supposed to be wolves here. They'd long been wiped out from these woods. My mind raced with possible explanations as I watched the creature. Then, the creature did something that upended all reasoning. I heard a loud popping sound, like bones cracking, and watched as it placed what looked like a hand on my car hood, lifted itself, and stood on two legs. It was no longer a wolf in appearance alone. Standing upright, it was at least 8 feet tall and weighed around 600 to 650 pounds. Its humanoid torso was muscular, and it had elongated fingers, each tipped with black claws. Fear gripped me when it moved to my side of the car, bent down, and tried the door handle with its hand. The doors were thankfully locked, but the sheer horror of its attempt to open them paralyzed me. After failing to open my door, it moved around to the passenger side, trying that handle too. I felt overwhelmed by a sense of dread, starkly aware of my vulnerability compared to such a beast. If it wanted, it could have ripped my car apart to get to me. Instead, it bared its fangs in a snarl that echoed deafeningly in the night before crossing the road on 2 legs. Before disappearing, it paused and looked back at me. I noticed more eyes in the dark, at least 5 pairs, some low to the ground, others standing upright. They shared the same glowing gaze. Realizing I was witnessing something more than a lone creature, I slammed on the accelerator, racing home in sheer panic. I arrived home in tears, shaken to the core. My parents listened to my account, but dismissed it as a black bear sighted in the dark. Despite their skepticism, I knew what I had seen. For over a month, I isolated myself, grappling with the reality of my encounter, until I stumbled upon the Dogman phenomenon during research. Others had seen similar creatures, providing a sliver of solace that I wasn't alone in my experience. I never reported the incident officially, fearing disbelief, but it left an indelible mark on me.